All right. Are we live? Are we live yet? Let's have a quick see. Let's see how the audio is faring over here. Welcome to those who have already come. Yeah, perfect. The audio is indeed working. Fantastic. All righty. So, welcome. It may only be an audience of one, but an audience all the same. Good evening, everyone. Lars here from Camille's Harem, not just a podcast by novice writers for novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And let me give a quick rundown as we get going right here. What we'll be doing. Good afternoon, Tevin, or at least where I'm at. Good evening. I don't know if the microphone is picking up through the walls the grandfather clock that is tolling out the hour right now, but it is 7 o'clock where I am at. I pretty much got it started right on the dot. Fantastic. Hi there, ISO. Good to have you here. Okay, so as a quick rundown of what I intend to be doing tonight, tonight, of course, I'm going to be talking about the warfare of storytelling. That's going to be the big topic right there. But first, I'm going to open up with talking about The Beast and the Witch, which is the footage that you should be seeing right there playing on the screen. I'll be giving a recommendation for this anime. It's still not too late for people to catch up with it if they wish. And I think it's pretty good right there. Yes, I so indeed Perry. Perry the platypus. Oh, it's just a normal platypus. Let's see here. Tevin quickly posts right here: Star Wars Battlefront Collection and Elden Ring DLC. I am so looking forward to the Elden Ring DLC, even though I am still battling my way through Elden Ring. I'm not a gamer. But I do enjoy playing Elden Ring, and I am very much looking forward to getting my butt kicked by all of the new horrifying bosses and monsters that will be introduced come later this year. Hi, Rex. Great to have you here. So, like I said, we'll be talking a little bit about The Beast and the Witch. We'll be then talking about the warfare of storytelling. And I'm going to get a little bit heavy with that simply because, man, I've been seeing some things recently playing out. And I feel like there's so much contention right now happening within just the general creator community. And there's a lot of things that just need to be rectified. And if people were just willing to get over their issues with learning anything about history, I think history could teach us a lot to help us improve not only our relations with other people, but also kind of to figure out what we can do as creators ourselves to really capitalize on a very momentous moment in history right now, where storytelling is probably more accessible than ever before. And then after that, we'll see what you guys want to talk about. Maybe we'll do a little bit of workshopping on people's stories. Ooh, actually, I do have one other thing that I probably want to do if we have the time for it. We'll be talking about Frieren Beyond Journey's End, and something that Scott helped me out since we last did a live stream that was really, really cool. So actually, we did talk about it a little bit when we did the live stream last time, but I want to dive back into it again. Let's see here. Quickly, some things you guys post right here. You can get wings. Yes. Oh, man. It's going to be nice getting wings. However, if you get the special lance that you get from killing Dragon Lord Plusegisax, however you're supposed to pronounce his name, if you're not careful, when you go flying with that thing, you can easily fly off the screen and die. So it'll be interesting to see how many people die once they get wings in the DLC. Tevin, I thought I was finished, but sadly I need an extra chapter to the story and aftermath to a battle. Hey, it is absolutely okay. Sometimes it's what you got to do. Right now, for one of the books that I'm writing, it's definitely going to be longer than I intended, and that's okay. if you need to add more, you add on more. And then when you start really editing your draft, you then can find where you can trim the fat and make things run a little bit better. So no worries there, Tevin. It's absolutely okay if you need to write an extra chapter. From Ryan, hi Lars, working on my truck as I listen this evening. Hey, awesome. Hopefully the truck does not try to eat you or isekai you. That would be awful. Again from Tevin, it depends on time period, but I do enjoy the delicious in dungeon anime. Oh yeah, and I am going to promise you this, Tevin. I do have a video idea in mind for delicious in dungeon, and I'm really looking forward to doing it. It's just a matter of me sitting down and taking the time to fully write out the script for it, because this is one that's going to need a script in order for me to make this work. And you'll see what I mean once that specific video for Delicious in Dungeon drops. So it's fun to fly off a cliff in a cloud of fury and death. Ah, yes. Tevin is going for a strength build. I went for a strength and dexterity build for myself in Elden Ring, and I like it. The only thing is that I kind of have come to regret it with a couple of bosses. I will say, I will share how I cheesed Melania after she killed me so many times. I was having such a rough time of it. I finally decided, you know what? I just went for the cursed shield of the three fingers. I put bleed on it, and then I used the mimic tier, so that way both the mimic and I had the shield with bleed, and then we just sandwiched Melania. So I let the mimic take the brunt at the beginning, went around Melania, and then we just sandwiched. And just kid you not, with bleed on those shields with the mimic, Melania went down in less than 30 seconds. She then jumped to her second mode, just had to run away, and then when she paused in the middle of the bloom, I was like, "What the heck? I'll just take the rot." And then again, sandwiched her in her second form down in 20 seconds. And I was like, "Holy cow! That should not have been this easy." But I am happy because she was wrecking me for hours. This was me just like whatever. I'm just going to start coming up with goofy ways of trying to beat this boss. And that's how I ended up beating her, was cheese. I also went for the Dex build, Ice, Lightning, and Blood Flame Katanas for PvE. I have not yet done PvE. I feel like I'm going to get absolutely slaughtered all fresh and new when I do that, but at some point I'll have to do it. Tevin, have you seen this Torture Princess anime? Wholesome demon lord dad spending time with his daughter. I have not. I have not yet seen that one. Thanks for the recommendation, Tevin. I saw again said right here. I used Haslow's Peter Whip enchanted with Frostbite. Actually, OP against Melania. Really? Oh, the Petal Whip. I'm going to have to try that out when I do my next run through, because I intend, when I'm finally done and I'm able then to just transport my beefed out character into the game and just it's all rebooted, I am going on a slaughter spree of all the bosses, of all the characters, when I'm completely OP'd up. That's what I'm going to do. So let's with that being said, let's dive here into the Beast and the Witch, or say the Witch and the Beast. It sounds better to me to say the Beast and the Witch, but that's not the name of the anime. This horror anime right here, this is one that I definitely encourage anyone to try out. It might not be your cup of tea at the beginning. I can totally understand that, especially with the way that the anime presents the story. It's not as epic as it is in manga. You get hit. But in the anime, for whatever reason, the anime just doesn't have quite the same heart to it. And I'm not sure why that is. It might be because of the animation. The animation is not quite as good as I would have suspected for this particular story. The audio's dying, huh? How's the audio now? Uh, Curse my internet connection. Do. Say, hopefully it's all better. I don't have any spinning wheel of death now on my side. Okay, it's better. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I will admit that behind the scenes, about an hour before setting things up, my internet, for whatever reason, cut on out. And so I had to re-put together everything for the stream. Good thing I'd saved all of the clips and whatnot. Otherwise, this would be just the Lars icon. But yeah, so for whatever reason, maybe it comes down to the way that things have been animated for the anime. Maybe it's the pacing. The pacing definitely seems to kind of derail how epic things were in the first couple of chapters. But that being said, I still would recommend this anime, at least for people to check out, because for a couple of reasons. Number one, I really like it when an anime, when a manga can take your stereotypical like battle shonen trope and go in a different direction with it. And one of the things that this story does is it's like, oh, well, here we have all these witches. And most people would think, oh, witches can do all these different kinds of amazing things. However, you normally then get in so many anime that a witch is only capable of using a certain kind of magic. And what you get here in The Witch and the Beast is that the witches all have a special kind of magic that they are really proficient in because of their heritage. However, they are capable of doing all different kinds of spells. And so it's neat because you have these witches who will have like your stereotypical like anime one-shot special move, and this is my kind of magic. But then they actually start doing all these other things that normally you wouldn't expect a character who has been class typed, I guess is the proper way to put it, set with like, well, this is your one kind of power, and that's the only thing you can ever do, like in Fairy Tale, where they can only do key magic, or fire breathing magic, or water magic. In this case, you have the witches who are very proficient in a certain kind of magic, but all other spells are open to them. They just need time and practice. And so you actually have these really powerful, really daunting, really dangerous magical characters, especially the witches, who then have a really cool power move that they can use, but they don't rely on it. And that's one of the things that leads into especially episodes 4 and 5. Episodes 4 and 5 are brilliant because of how it takes that concept and runs with it, rather than just sticking a character to a specific class and being like, that's the only magic you can use. And I know that this is not revolutionary to anyone who is very interested in the more Western style version of witches who can do all different kinds of spells and cool stuff. But for anime and for manga, this is a huge deviation from the norm. And I really, really like it. And the story pulls it off well. And another reason why I think that people will find this interesting to watch is that the main pair, they're not a couple, it's a main pair who are going around hunting witches, just have a fantastic dynamic. It's all business, and it's very antagonistic towards each other. And so you get a lot of really great quips. You have excellent chemistry that is super volatile. You have the situation where the characters mistrust each other, but because of the job that they're doing, they have to trust each other. And so you just have this fantastic dynamic between them, and then how they interact with everyone. It works really, really well. And then there is also a good mystery element to each one of the cases that the characters take on. What is actually so in the very first episode where they're supposed to hunt a witch, everyone loves this witch. Why is it then that everyone loves this individual who is very clearly evil? Well, that's the mystery that has to be solved. And then for the second mystery, which is one of my favorite ones, you have all of these women who are being killed in absolutely brutal ways by a witch, and they have to solve, okay, why are all these women being targeted, and then uncover, like, wait a second, this is all leading to a specific target. There's actually a specific person that this witch seems to be after. And so you get some legit detective work happening. It's pulled off a little bit better in the manga, but it is present within the anime. And so it's neat getting a detective story mixed in with magic. I think that's a really good combination. So those are my big reasons why, even if this might not necessarily be your cup of tea, why you should probably give it a try. And if you don't like it, that's okay. You can move on to something else. But I've really been enjoying The Witch and the Beast so far this season. Let's see here. Coming back to what you guys have typed here in the chat. From Ryan, I heard a rumor that many cell towers were down across the U.S. today. They may have something to do with the spotty connection. You know what? I wouldn't doubt it, especially because I'm gonna throw some people under the bus of this right here. Cell phone companies, telecommunication companies have no reason to up their game. They have no reason to actually do better with their cell towers, with their connections. And the reason being is because we're now a society where, just as we're doing right here, we wouldn't be able to have this connection without Wi-Fi. And because people need it, they need it more so for a lot of the things that they do, even more so than they need gasoline. Like you can give up using your car, you can get a ride with someone else, you can use a bike, you can get into public transportation, you can walk where you got to go. Sure, it's going to take you a lot longer, but we're still interconnected enough that you can move around without using your car. You can live without gasoline. But our lives have become so tailored to our phones, to our computers, to all these other digital amenities that we need Wi-Fi. And as such, because everyone needs it, these companies have no incentive to do any better. The technology that could actually totally radicalize where we are with Wi-Fi, give us even greater connection and speedier, and allow us to do all kinds of things where you could go into the woods out in the middle of nowhere and use your phone however you wish. We should be able to be there. In fact, we have the technology to be there, but companies have no incentive to upgrade because that costs a whole lot. And they just know people are willing to pay for what they can get. It's annoying. It's awful. And I'm saying this as a guy who loves capitalism. Capitalism is one of the engines that moves the world along, but the principles of capitalism are not necessarily universal. Just because there's a need does not mean that need will be met and that a superior product will be created. Sure, within time it will happen, but where there isn't an incentive, where there isn't proper competition, it's never going to happen. So it's just a little sidetrack right there. Talking philosophies with Lars, which is, I mean, kind of a little taste of the spiciness for tonight, talking about the warfare of storytelling. But yeah, so there we have it for The Witch and the Beast. If you guys have any questions about that, then please feel free to put your questions there into the chat, and we can talk about that. And if you are typing that, you need some time. I'm going to quickly change the footage on over to, we were talking about Elden Ring earlier. Elden Ring. Heyo. I actually decided to pull up a lot of my old footage, my old gameplay footage from Elden Ring, and blend it together for tonight. Since we're talking about warfare, and I don't have many games where I've recorded anything where it's like, ooh, here's the massive armies that are moving around, like what you can see, for instance, on like Kings and Generals or History Marsh. Definitely do a really great job with getting some like good footage and whatnot there. Yeah, I don't have any of that, so we're going with Elden Ring. Watch me struggle to kill a bat. That bat's nowhere near my guy. From Ryan, y'all may know that internet service providers have agreed to localize monopolies with each other, often leaving consumers with an option in a given area. Can't have capitalism without competition. Yes, that is absolutely the case. In order for capitalism to work, there must be competition. It's one of the reasons why monopolies are a bad thing, but monopolies are also one of the almost inherent issues that capitalism breeds, because as you continue to grow and accumulate money and create product, and you're trying to reach out to more people, it requires you to take on your enemies and your competition, and it just leads to monopolies. It's one of the things that you can learn from looking at the American Gilded Age, which is one of the suckiest times in world history, but it's also one of the most fascinating times to discuss. Myso, I'm literally currently playing Elden Ring. Awesome. My Black Flame build, pretty strong, not entirely great. I've wondered about doing my own Black Flame build, or relying on it a little bit more, because it can be really helpful in certain cases. But yeah, so let's then shift gears, and let's talk about what the what the title for this live stream is, and it's a war of storytelling. Now then, I'm going to try to step into the role again of being a teacher. Professor Lars is in the house, though I never got my doctorate, so I can't actually call myself Professor Lars. Instead, I can be a master because I have my master's degree. From I'm Omega, painting a picture of a jaguar. Hey, awesome. I'm glad that you are right now working on that. And we might have some chats actually about that later. So what I want to do for this, bear with me right here, because what I'm going to do is I'm first going to tell you guys a little bit of history. I'm going to tell you guys a story, and then I'm going to equate that to the current problems that so many creators, so many fans, so many aspiring authors, and so many people within the larger entertainment industry are all dealing with right now. And once again, if people just understood their history just slightly better, we might actually be able to figure out, oh, we are in this particular situation here. Oh, yay. The wheel of death returned just momentarily. Curse you. Yes, Master Lars does sound quite distinguished. I did have a friend who called me Dr. Gonzo for a while. But again, I don't have my doctorate, so I can't officially call myself doctor. All right, so here is the history, here's the story. The Peloponnesian Wars. Way back when, and I am a historian who hates talking about dates, so I'm not even going to bother. I will, however, actually share a very excellent link for all of you about the Peloponnesian Wars, fought in what would effectively be the 5th century BC. Let me quickly come over here and just pop it on in. Boom. From Kings and Generals. Fantastic channel, and this is a fantastic series breaking down all the big aspects of the Peloponnesian War. So the Peloponnesian War is this massive war between all of the city-states of Greece, largely led by ancient Athens and ancient Sparta. And this war would get big. It would expand well beyond the natural boundaries of Greece. It would go all the way out to Sicily. It would go out almost to now modern day Rome. It would go out into the heart of the Persian Empire. This war effectively became for the ancient world a world war in its scope, all because Athens and Sparta just could not stand each other. After the Persian Wars, Athens and Sparta emerged as the two basically superpowers of Greece. And because they were politically and ideologically opposed to each other, they were and essentially neighbors. They were set on the war path. It's not that it was inevitable that they would come into conflict with each other. It was just that conflict was very, very likely. And given the attitudes of the ancient Greeks, it was all but inevitable that these two city states were going to clash. Now then, the Athenians knew that they could not take the Spartans on in battle on the land. And the Spartans knew that they couldn't take the Athenians on in battle on the water. So what they did was they reached out to other city-states, and they formed these massive alliances that brought in people from all across the Mediterranean world, all across Greece, up to the borders of the Persian Empire. And once their alliances were formed, both sides just basically waited to see who was going to pull the trigger and start the war. So the war begins, and it dragged on for decades, completely consuming Greece, with countless thousands being killed, city-states getting obliterated in the process. And eventually Persia, which had been thoroughly beaten and humbled by Greece, coming in as the financial backer, mostly for Sparta, but really playing all the different sides off of each other in order to weaken Greece. And by the end of this long war, Athens had basically lost their entire alliance with all these other city-states. They had lost most of their colonies and had drained their resources. They had lost so much of their population due to battles, to plague, getting lost at sea, and all these things. So Athens was just was all but destroyed by the war as a result of this. Though Sparta won, Sparta had lost its air of invincibility, and they had, just like with Athens, they had lost so many people to disease, to battle, and as a result, they were weak despite being the victors. And you had all these other city-states that had lost power or had ceased to exist, and Persia now was everywhere. Their influence was everywhere. Where the Greeks had once pulled the whole "this is Sparta" and like throwing Persians into wells and doing all this crazy stuff where they could just manhandle the Persians however they wanted. The Persians couldn't do anything about it. After the war, Greek city-states everywhere were indebted to the Persians. Persian officials could come and go as they pleased anywhere within Greece. Persia basically owned the banks of Greece, and at the same time, Persia went and began absorbing and conquering all these other colonies and city-states that were close to their borders. And so Persia really was like the real winner of the war. And then lo and behold, you then have the city-state of Macedon, which throughout the entire war, everyone had looked down on the Macedonians, being like, you guys aren't even Greek. I mean, yeah, you speak Greek, but really you are the sons of mongrels, of barbarians. You guys just speak bar, bar, bar to each other, which is where we actually get the term barbarian, because the Greeks just said it all sounds like bar, bar, bar to me. So Macedonians were looked down on throughout the entire war. People were all like, you're not even Greek. And the Macedonians were all like, fine, we've been abused for all of these decades. No one takes us seriously. The rest of Greece is weak. The only city that has anything together right now is Thebes, of all cities. Thebes, the city that's made fun of in Hercules. Yo, man, we're going to go to Thebes. It's a city with a lot of problems. And that's absolutely the truth. Thebes comes out as the most powerful city-state after the Peloponnesian War, and Macedonia just comes and steamrolls their way through Thebes, takes over all of Greece, and then turns around and backhands Persia, and that leads us to Alexander the Great. So, that was, in very, very brief, very, very brief, the Peloponnesian War. Why do I bring this up? Why do I say that we need to know this bit of long gone ancient history in order to understand where we are now? This is what I was this is something I would constantly tell my students back when I was a teacher. History won't mean anything to you until you learn how it applies to you. And there's so many things within history that will be interesting to you on a personal level, that will actually affect you on a personal level. Not just massive armies moving and presidents and kings and queens and famous people doing their thing, Amelia Earhart flying across the ocean. What does that really matter? Well, for some people, that really actually does matter to them. And for other people, just a random little thing in history could actually have huge implications on them personally because of how it shaped their family or shaped their community. History is incredibly important, and we need to know our history in order to understand who we are and in what times we live. So, looking at right here, this is why I bring up the Peloponnesian War, because where we are at as fans, as creators, and just the general overall creative community, from movie makers to showrunners to authors to musicians to storytellers to artists, we find ourselves broken up into several camps. I have a little note right here about this. So, Athens and Sparta, they represent something that really has kind of dominated the whole conversation right now, which it shouldn't. It's dangerous to actually focus on this right here. The political and ideological divide between creators. And this is something that I've just seen really just take control of the overall conversation, where you have people lambasting other creators, not because their works are bad, but because they come from a different political party than I do. They have a different ideology. They have a different religion than I do. They look different than me. And both sides of the political divide do this. It's not just one, it's both. I have friends on both sides. I watch commentators and influencers from both sides, and every side does it. And it's stupid. It needs to stop. It's as dumb, as pointless, and as destructive as Athens and Sparta going and duking it out. And when we step back a little bit and think about this right here, you have companies like Disney destroying themselves and their legacy, all to prove an ideological point. And then at the same time, you have a bunch of other people who are like, well, then we're going to create counter stories. This is the whole counterculture, the culture wars, and all this stuff, where they effectively start creating games, shows, movies, books that exist to own the other side. And that's dumb. That's not creative. That's just petty. But it's happening so often. So you have this political divide amongst creators, which I believe is largely represented by Sparta and Athens, two city-states that don't need to fight, and yet we are fighting each other. Or I should say, a lot of people are. And it's dumb, exactly. So this is why I hate politics. It genuinely tears our human relationships into categories and factions. Yeah, that's not the way that it should be, but we just do this to ourselves. And I've seen so much of it. I've seen too much of it. And a lot of the commentators and creators on YouTube that I once really enjoyed are now just going so political in different directions, and it's annoying. It's not needed. It really cheapens what they have to say, and now they spend more time bashing other people than they do being creative. We're losing creativity, and I'm going to get a little bit more into that here once I've wrapped up the different categories right here. We then have the Persian faction. This is the foreign influence, and this actually goes for really all different sides. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. For instance, I opened this up talking about a great anime that I personally enjoy and recommending it. It's really, really good to have foreign stories come into your culture, because you get to see the world through different eyes. You get different kinds of stories. You learn different things from other people. Talking about I'm Omega, painting a picture of a jaguar and looking at the different manga that have been created for not just Japanese culture, but for other cultures to display new kinds of stories. That's amazing. That outside influence is really, really special. And if you're willing to be open-minded and engage with it, you can learn from it. You can be inspired and become a better storyteller. However, we have people who are absolutely afraid of this outside influence and are convinced that it will somehow destroy what we have. And I see, again, just way too much of this where people are inherently against something like anime because it's not American. And because it's not American, it's not okay. And then it's like, well, what about, for instance, European stuff like Wakfu from France, which is really, really good. And people are like, oh, but that's French. We don't need any Frenchy stuff right here. I'm like, excuse me? Like, Wakfu is incredible. Sure, there's a lot of things that Wakfu does that if you understand European tendencies, especially French tendencies, it's a little bit silly. But at the same time, it's still such a great story with fun, relatable characters, beautiful action, beautiful animation. Why would you turn this down simply because it comes from France? That's just dumb. And so we have to understand that within this conflict between creators, there is a push against foreign intervention or foreign stories coming into different kinds of countries. Unfortunately, it's a big thing here in the US, but it is something that we can still see happening over in other countries as well. It's not just inherently an American problem. It's unfortunately all over the place that people fear this foreign influence, and different countries, different creators are taking measures to try to prevent other people from sharing their cultural stories, their national stories, outside of their traditional bounds. And again, this is just kind of dumb. And then I have right here for our Macedonians, what is a Macedonian faction? That would be the independent creators, just like the Macedonians. People who do indie art, indie movies, indie games, indie books, self-published books, and the likes. They are constantly seen as less than. They are not the real writers. They are not the real movie makers. They are not the real storytellers. They're not the real artists. They're just shams. And what I love is just like how Macedonia came in and just started wrecking the rest of Greece to prove a point. We see that happening right now. Yes, sure, Pop sold Has Been Hotel to A24 and Amazon Studios in order to get it done, but she made a point. And on top of that, she's free to continue doing Hell of a Boss. Lackadaisy proved that a small, dedicated community could help to fund and create an absolutely amazing show. And I'm so looking forward to the upcoming episodes of Lackadaisy. And then if you've been paying attention to what Glitch has been dropping, we're already going to be getting more stuff for the Amazing Digital Circus. The Amazing Digital Circus and Murder Drones have been owning and destroying Hollywood. And it didn't have to be this way. It was because Hollywood did not take these people seriously. If they had, they could have actually joined an alliance with these amazing independent creators and helped to create amazing stories. But they're not taking them seriously. And as a result, unbeknownst to them, because they're so caught up in their Athens versus Sparta style conflict, they don't realize that the Macedonian indie creators are stealing their lunch. And that's exactly what's happening right here. And then, Ryan, before I get to your comment that you placed right there, the last faction that needs to be added in, and this really throws everything up in the air, is AI. This would be like if the Terminator, if Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator was dropped into the middle of the Peloponnesian War. That is basically the effect that AI is having on the creative scene right now, because this empowers basically everyone. Anyone can make a deal with AI. They can use AI. It's a tool, but at the same time, it's a tool that if used incorrectly could absolutely turn on you and end up destroying more than you intended to create. So we'll get a little bit more into that. But coming to what Ryan said, I've noticed that too. I've had to abandon so many podcasts and YouTube channels because of how much politics seems to be mixed into their every production. Yeah, and I I just don't like it. There's so many amazing content creators who have helped me to learn about art, especially about the film industry, about books, and people who just had at one point just really great humorous takes and reactions to all different kinds of stories, and now it's just politics. And yes, politics are important. Politics are a part of our life, but you shouldn't turn everything that you do into some kind of political statement. We here at Camille's Harem, and we brought this up before, but I'm going to bring it up again. The only politics that we are going to care about and that we are really going to talk about in any kind of depth here on this channel are fictional politics, because real world politics is just too divisive. And and to be honest, we in the harem, we all have different political opinions, and we've gotten heated about them at times. And what makes our friendship last is that we're able to step away from it and say, you do you, you have your thoughts and opinions, you've got what you want to do. I'll let you do it. I'll let you believe that way. I'm not going to try to convince you or argue about it. And we just leave it be. And because it has led so many times to arguments and it's so divisive, why talk about it? So, talking about fictional politics. So thank you for your question right here. Any tips on writing fictional politics? So again, as Professor Laws right here, before we get back to talking a little bit about history and what we can actually learn from this, I'm going to tell you again something that I told my students. And it's this: if you want to understand politics, and if you want to write politics well, think of it like this. Politics is nothing more than children playing with their toys in a toy room. And the reason why I say that is because you have in this toy room, in really any kind of toy room, like think about preschool or a kindergarten, you have all these toys. There's so many toys, and there's enough toys for every kid. There are rules dictating how the kids are supposed to play with their toys. You have 15 minutes to play with your toys. Make sure that you're respectful, make sure that you share, and you're going to have a good time. Well, what kids begin doing is kids are like, well, I only want to play with my friends. And so they begin excluding the other kids who are not their friends. And then they might also say, well, I really want to play with the train tracks, but Jimmy's not letting me. Here, Jimmy, I'm going to give you this amazing action figure if you let me have the train tracks. And then Jimmy can either decide to say yes and hand over the train tracks, or Jimmy will say, no, the action figure is not enough. I either hate you and I'm not going to give it to you, or I want more. You're going to give me more toys so that way I can have fun doing now something different. And then the other kids can either decide to take up Jimmy's offer or beat up Jimmy and take Jimmy's toys. Or you might have where a kid, a really charismatic kid, is like, hey, everyone, I've got new rules, and everyone's going to obey my new rules, and we're all going to play together. That's basically politics. And so when you then think about it, what you can do when writing your own fictional politics is this. You say, okay, then I have a kingdom or a nation or a certain political issue, and that is the toy room with its toys. What do the different kids in this situation, the different politicians, aka the kids, what do they want? How are they going to get that? What are the rules by which they're supposed to play? Are they going to obey those rules, or are they going to break those rules? And if they break those rules, what are the consequences? Let's see here. Ryan, real quick. I see it more of a competition than a fight. If you really think your beliefs are so much better rather than putting others down, live your life well. Yeah, excellent advice right there. Don't put other people down because they don't see things they do. Uh, build Man, I see it right here on my end. Suddenly this little circle comes and like, oh no. Oh no. My internet connection. In any case, ISO, let's go in actually like a little bit deeper, taking ourselves out of the toy room. Which again, if you really want to know what you can do as far as politics goes, always go back to the toy room analogy, and turn your characters into children and what they want or what they're trying to do into toys. And I think that will actually really help you out. But then let's let's actually use a good example from Game of Thrones to help highlight this even better. Oh boy, Game of Thrones usually isn't actually that good of an example as some people think, but there actually is one right here. So in Game of Thrones, the best political maneuvering of Game of Thrones has to do with how the rest of the kingdoms, how the king of the Seven Kingdoms deals with the North. Because the North was when Ned Stark and his family are taken captive by King Joffrey, the North rises up in rebellion because they know that the Lannisters who support the king, because the king is part Lannister, will will try to prevent a trade of hostages because it will allow them to exert greater power over the North. The only reason why the North didn't go to war against the other seven kingdoms, against the other six kingdoms, is because of the really good relationship that Ned Stark, the Lord of the North, had with the previous king. Now that that relationship is destroyed, civil war is all but inevitable. And the North is trying to show that by gathering all of the men at arms and raising a massive army. The toy that they want, effectively, or the thing that they want, is give us Ned Stark and his family back. If you let us have the Lord of the North back, then we will take that as a sign of good faith that the kingdom can still stay together, and we won't go to war because we have our leader back, and we will form a new treaty, and we can all, and everything will be all hunky-dory. The problem is that Joffrey had Ned Stark beheaded. So the toy that the other kids want has effectively been broken into pieces. It's as if the popular kid in the kindergarten class took the really cool action figure and is like, if I can't have it, no one will, and then proceeded to rip the action figure into pieces. So as far as the North is concerned, you just got rid of the toy that could have allowed us all to play in peace. But you didn't. You took it from us. You destroyed it. You killed Ned Stark. Therefore, what should the North do? The North will go to war. We could have always exerted our independence. We have the power to do so. We will do it. And so the North goes to war. And they begin just crushing the other kingdoms. And so then, as far as King Joffrey and his faction go, their choices then are try to beat the North in battle, which isn't going over so well. We're losing tons of people. We could make peace with the North, which would make King Joffrey instantly look weak. He already looks weak because he had Ned Stark killed when he didn't need to do it. Because he did it, the other kingdoms do not trust the king. They are looking for any reason to betray him. Therefore, he must either be benevolent or he must be strong. Joffrey, because he's a psychopath, is never going to be benevolent. So therefore, he must be strong. But he can't win on the battlefield. That means that he has to use subterfuge in order to beat the North, in order to kill the new king, which then leads him to then doing his research, which is good, and finding out that the new king of the North, Ned's son, whose name is right now eluding me, he had made a promise in order to circumnavigate the Lannister armies and catch them in the rear. He had made an agreement with the Lord of the Twins that he would marry one of his daughters in exchange for safe passage across the bridge of the Twins, allowing him to come across and hit the Lannisters in the rear. This was a political choice, and he has promised that he will marry this daughter. However, because war and him being a dumb teenager, he ended up sleeping with another woman and decides that he's going to take her to be his wife. Well, that doesn't go over very well with the twins, with the Lords of the Twins, with the whatever their buckets names are. I just remember that in the show, it's done by the guy who plays as Filch. And he then's like, hey, I can give you the North if I will then I will bring them together for the wedding. I will have them all killed at the wedding, which then removes the kids that you can't beat. And this severely weakens the North, which then allows Joffrey's faction to then reach out to some of the families of the North that feel a little disenchanted with the cause and promise them wealth and position, so that way they will then usurp power in the North. And so there you have it. That is politics right there. Understanding your opponents, understanding the rules by which people are playing, what motivates people, what do they really want, and if you want politics to work out well, to work out peacefully, everyone finds out what they want, and then they work together to get it. They compromise. And I actually did an experiment with this with my students, where I brought tons of toys into the class, and I split them all up into factions, and I gave them a list of things to do. They had to like build a certain tower, or they had to enact a certain scenario. They had to get so many toys. And whoever did this, whichever faction achieved all of their goals first, would win. Well, what the kids do, what the kids did, and this is honestly what people should do if they're being smart about politics, is they're like, hey, you've got such and such stuff that I need. They're like, hey, you have all the Duplos that we need to build a tower. But we have the Barbies that you need to enact that one to do your tea party. So let's trade. Here's the Barbies, and we'll take the Duplos. And then there was another group that's like, hey, we need the Duplos to reenact the destruction of a house. We have to build a house and then destroy it with a soccer ball. And so the other group's like, okay. Well, once we've built our stuff with the Duplos, then you can use them to build your house and then knock it down with a soccer ball. Boom. Getting together, that's politics. In many ways, that's fantasy. Because unfortunately, it doesn't work that easy in real life, because people are jerks, because people are greedy, because people don't know how to communicate. And which is why when you make everything political, it tends to fall apart. So I hope that is deep enough right there to help you hopefully learn something right there. Again, if you really want to make fictional politics work, just think about kids in a toy room playing with toys, and you can then have some fun with it, where you then, for every individual story, for whatever politics you're writing, then think about, okay, who are my characters? What do they want? Let me boil this down to kids in kindergarten playing with toys, and then start acting it out. And I've learned that really helps to simplify things. It makes it easier to understand politics, and therefore makes it a little bit easier to write. You don't need to know all of the ins and outs of laws and of alliances and all of this messy stuff. If you do know that, it makes it easier to write, because you then have that knowledge, but you don't necessarily need it in order to write good fictional politics. And that's because this is something that, since we are in an election year, a global election year, it might actually be good for me to do some videos specifically on that, especially because there are some really great examples from stuff like Beyonders and the Stormlight Archive, which I think would be really fun to dive into. So that was a massive deviation, but a good one from the topic. So coming back to the history lesson, what can we learn for ourselves now when we look at the Peloponnesian War? The big thing that I take away is this, that what we actually see is we see the mainstream entertainment complex falling apart. And it just is. Unfortunately, fewer people are going to movie theaters, and that's in part because not enough good movies are being made. Good movies are being made, but just not enough of them. People have lost faith in good storytelling. People are also getting used to bad storytelling. And even though they're used to it, they just feel it deep down. It's hard for them to really describe it, but they just realize this is bad. I've had conversations with a lot of different people who realize that there's something wrong with our modern day storytelling. It's lacking the spice, the adventure, like not the political messaging, but the moral messaging of like heroism, family, friendship, standing up for your own personal values, acceptance. A lot of that is just kind of disappearing in favor of again just a more political message that may or may not land well with the audience, and that's just sad to see. Characters now are reduced more often to stereotypes than they are given a chance to actually be real individuals with their own unique voice, mannerisms, and personality. A lot of that has unfortunately kind of gone out the window. The ability to actually form good plots and deliver some interesting mysteries and all that kind of stuff, that also seems to just kind of be gone. We don't see that quite as often. A silly comedy out of the 80s ends up landing with greater character development, action, romance, laughter than too much of the stuff that we see today. And when it comes, for instance, to writing books, of one of Nathan's cousins was recently chatting with us, and we were having an in-depth conversation into her woes of reaching out to publishers. How publishers are no longer kind like they once were. Like where I got rejection letters from publishers that were actually really nice, where they were like, "Hey, thank you so much for being interested in us. We either can't do your book because we've already filled our quota, or we don't publish your genre." Or they're like, "Sorry, we won't work with you unless you have an agent." But so many of the people who sent me rejection letters were like, "We're so glad that you're working on your own stories. We wish you the best of luck. Oh, if you need to improve your skill, they're like, here's some things you can think about. Ooh, why don't you try out this editor, or why don't you try out this website? It'll put you into contact with some good people." Like publishers used to be really nice with their rejection letters. Apparently not so much anymore now. They're just really brutal. And they're like, "No, you're not writing, unless you're writing a book like Fourth Wing, we don't want to hear from you. So away with you. Don't bother us again." And they're just very rude about it. And so when I see that happening, that's so discouraging. It's a little wonder why so many new authors just feel like they can't cut it. And they're so afraid to share their stories, because when you get a rejection letter like that from a person who's within the industry, someone who you're potentially going to rely on to hopefully make a career out of doing what you love, that's heartbreaking. That's soul shattering. That's earth shattering to some people, because they lose hope that they can actually do something good with what they love, that they could make a living off of doing what they love. Which, I mean, that's kind of the goal for so many people. If you do what you love, then you will never work a day in your life, kind of a thing. People want to feel fulfilled with doing whatever it is that they're doing, especially the creative types. We want to know that what we're doing matters to someone, that it's done well. And when we're shown such disrespect, then why bother? And the unfortunate thing is that at the same time that this is happening, other creators, and again, this kind of goes on to some of the political toxicity that I've been seeing on YouTube a whole lot, is that you have a lot of YouTubers who are like, "Fine," like where they go all thousand, they put on the glove and they're like, "Fine, I'll do it myself." And it's neat. There's actually some great things that independent creators here on YouTube have done, but so many of them also end up going toxic, where they start creating stories just to own the other side, to own those people who said that they could never do it. And the thing is this, that they spent so much time creating a story that was meant to own their enemies, that it ended up not being all that good. And some examples that I feel bad pointing this on out, but Shadow of the Conqueror by Shad Brooks or Shadiversity. I like the Shadiversity channel, and he's made me laugh many times. He's actually got some really great insights onto some historical elements that really helped me to form some of the stuff that I've written in my own books. Like, he's got great content, but then when I read his book it wasn't written well, and he could have improved had he gotten some good feedback and actually used that feedback. But then there's just all this toxicity that unfortunately comes from Shad, where he's pushing AI art without realizing what he's actually doing, where he is happily trying to destroy people's careers, and he's more than happy to ignore any sort of good criticism. That's not okay. And recently I wanted to have a look into Isom from the Rippaverse, because all these people were saying it was a really great comic, and hey, who doesn't love a great comic? And then I go to check it out, and it was lazy. I wouldn't say lazily put together, because I'm not a great artist myself, so I can't judge based off of my own skills. But you can just tell that just something wasn't quite clicking. And when other artists begin to point out, yeah, like, this is what you could have done to do it better, and then the Rippaverse people all start coming back with saying, well, we've sold so many copies, therefore it is a hit, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not a good argument. That's not a good argument. That's just self-aggrandizing. You don't learn, you don't grow from that way. You need to be able to take criticism. You need to be able to learn and to grow. I think a really good example, though, of independent creators on YouTube actually doing something neat are Geeky Sparkles and Neon from Clownfish TV. You might disagree with their hot takes, but if you actually read Shadowbinders, it is well drawn and it's a fun story. I am so excited for the next installments. And an interesting thing is actually, like, listening to them talk about their different interactions with editors, is that editors have told them in the past that what they were doing was bad, and they definitely pushed back against it. But I think that they actually showed the positive stuff that other people like Brandon Sanderson have talked about, where when your editor tells you that what you're doing is bad, you shouldn't be like, no, you're wrong. You then say, okay, then tell me why it's bad. Let me know, so that way I can work on improving my skill and my craft. And you can see that in what Neon and Geeky Sparkles managed to create with their Shadowbinders series, is that, yeah, it's rough around the edges, but it's a fun story, and it just gets better with time. And it's great to see that improvement. And you wouldn't have that if you didn't have good feedback and creators who were willing to take that feedback and use it in their own way to better their story. And that's its own large discussion to be had right there. But yeah, so but the thing is, this is that, like, and that's me kind of getting a little bit into the weeds again, stepping out of the weeds, looking at it right here. There's just this crazy divide that isn't helping anyone. It's only destroying things. Hollywood is losing tons of money. The comic book industry has completely lost to anime and to manga, 100%. And actually, I'll tell you guys something right here. My original thesis idea when I was working on my master's degree, and it was turned down because my professors despised anime and manga. They're like, what is this evil thing? I refuse to touch it. I'm an old person. Don't show me that stuff. Comic books will rot your brain, kid. My original thesis idea, which was immediately shot down, was I was going to argue, and this was actually back in 2015, before manga and anime really began blowing up in the States. I was going to argue that the Japanese were actually taking over our entertainment industry, and that there was a long history. There is a long history of how Japanese entertainers, Japanese storytellers, have had a massive impact on storytelling in the United States. It was slow at first, but the foundation was laid well before the 90s to allow anime and manga to sweep the United States. And we see that playing out right now. And that was what I was going to research and argue and do my thesis on before it all got shot down. And again, that kind of comes down to like the whole Persian aspect, where right now people in the United States, like storytellers, publishers, Hollywood, are terrified of Japan and Korea because they are creating all these amazing shows that are connecting with audiences here, and they're losing dollars to these creators from other countries. And so they're trying to now block some of those stories from coming on over here to the States. They're trying to edit them to the point they're trying to edit them into hell so that way they won't work out here. You've got Disney. Disney has been buying up anime just to shut it down so that way no one has a chance to see it legally here in the States. It's horrible. A really sad example of that is Heavenly Delusion. Heavenly Delusion might not get a second season because its overseas market was killed intentionally by Disney. And it's because Disney does not want other nations or other companies to come on in and dominate a space that they thought that they were controlling. But they don't anymore because Disney's been losing over $1 billion with their horrible movies in the last year, which has allowed, again, the small guys, the Macedonians, Glitch, Lackadaisy through Iron Circus, and Visipop just come in and take over and rule the roost. Oh boy. So it feels like the Peloponnesian War is playing out right before our very eyes in the entertainment industry. And yet, like I said, AI has been introduced, which is like the Terminator. It's like the Terminator has been dropped into the middle of ancient Greece, and the ancient Greeks have no idea what to do. That is in many ways where we are kind of at the moment. I'll get into that once I've read what ISO wrote right here. If I write a bad book and you ever do a review on it, I hope you absolutely drill into me about it. Let me know what I did bad so I can understand what was bad, why it was bad, and how I can be better. And here's the thing, ISO. This is why we are here as Camille's Harem. We were here to help inspire and assist other novice authors to the best of our ability, so that way everyone could make the best stories that they possibly could. That has been our goal all along. And so our hope is that if you're willing to share your stories with us, that we can get to a point where like we can help you out and you can learn on your own to the point where you will improve to the extent that when your first book is released, sure, it's going to still read as a first book. That's inevitable for every author. But that doesn't mean it will be bad. It will be good. It will be your first book. Everyone will know it's your first book because of how there's just this neat, raw quality to everyone's first novel. But it can still be done well. It can be done great. And that's what we want to see. And the more that you share, the more that you learn, you will be in a perfect position to do really well. But let's say that you don't take any advice. You do decide to publish your first book without getting any sort of feedback, not just from us, but from other people. It is bad. Oh boy, I'm taking you up on this. I will do that. Let's see here from I'm Omega. I know I pitched this before, but the series No Evil from Betsy Lee is a good watch for an indie show. Think animal spirits and artifacts from indigenous mythology in the late 1800s, America, etc. The world. I can link the stories down here if you like. I'm Omega. Please do. Please put that link down. I want to check it out. From Verity. Yeah, good job, Disney. Buy an extremely plot-heavy show like Heavenly Delusion instead of a show you could easily make a season 2 for. Yeah, I know, right? If Disney had appropriated their money properly and actually cared about their own projects, we could have gotten more episodes of of the Owl House, for one thing. We could have had more of the Owl House, which would have been really good for them. They could have bothered actually merchandising stuff like the Owl House, Amphibia, Molly, the Ghost of Molly McGee, Gravity Falls, and just made a good amount of money. Or if they were going to buy Heavenly Delusion, which oh man, I'll say something about that here in just a sec. If you're going to buy Heavenly Delusion, buy into the merchandising aspect and make a mint off of it. Because crying out loud, it's such a good show. If they had let it play and really pull people on in, could have done well. Really, really could have done well, because it is a fantastic show. But I'll tell you this, Verity. This is my belief of what happened, and maybe I'm wrong right here, but I'll throw it out there anyway. I think that what happened is this: that Disney is like, the kids all like anime. Find good anime. Let us buy it on up, so that way we can steal that market and get money, or at least shut down the Japanese animators by taking away their good stuff. And what they did was, and I have a friend in Hollywood who actually has this job where all they do is, for the entire day, they read the plots of different books and comics and manga and short stories. And if they think it's good, they'll do a quick read of it. They'll write up a very short note and then pass it on to their boss, who then compiles a list of the best notes and then passes along to then someone up in higher management, who then makes pitches for the company to buy up all of those stories based on those notes. These people have never read these books. They've never read these manga or comic books. They have no idea what they're buying up. And I think that, given how Disney has really pushed for DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that they read the note that one of Heavenly Delusion's two main characters is a trans character, and they're like, oh, beautiful, please make sure that you buy up Heavenly Delusion because we want that trans character. It was done, and then when the higher-ups got the story and started bothering looking into it, they then found out that main character gets sexually assaulted. And they're probably like, oh my gosh, we can't do this. No, we cannot do this. And decided to completely shelve Heavenly Delusion stateside. I'm pretty certain that that's what happened. And here's the thing, is that I've already actually done a video on that particular topic, especially for that scene, because it is a horrifying scene. It is a shocking scene. And it's one that a lot of people were like, yeah, this probably shouldn't have been done. And I did a video on, like, here's the thing. I don't like the scene. I don't like the content, but this is why that scene is so important. And that's why this had to be in the story, or at least from the creator's perspective, and why it was adapted in the anime. And the anime, at least as far as that horrible content goes, did it, I would argue, very reasonably, very professionally, and really held back from what is implied in the manga, or what's even outright shown in the manga. So, again, Disney, being dumb in Disney, freaked out most likely when they saw what they actually had their hands on and didn't appreciate what they actually had. And as Verity says right here, it is a pivotal scene. It is the scene that absolutely changes so much in the story. And I'm actually really looking forward to catching up with the current arc in the manga, because it does start tying back into that moment and really sets things on up. And oh, look at that! Oh, I'm actually going to pop back to that a little bit later. That horrifying image that just showed up there on the scene. How coincidental! I got footage right here from when I actually did my video on the actual modern war for myth and what's been going on right here. So we've kind of been going. Yeah, classic toxic and destructive behavior, Disney. Bravo. Yeah. Oh, Disney, how you have fallen. So here's the thing. Coming back to the whole Terminator aspect, with AI now thrown into the mix, AI is a tool that can make the creative process way quicker. Is it necessarily better? That's a conversation to be had. And actually, we here at Camille's Harem, behind the scenes, we've had that discussion. Nathan is of the opinion that actually it is, and it will do us a whole lot of good. Me and Jed are of the opinion no. And our reasoning for that is because you need skill. You develop skills by putting in the effort, even for the menial tasks. AI takes away a lot of that effort and the work on the menial tasks. When you can tell AI what you want to have it do, while you then focus on the aspect that you really care about, AI does the rest, and then you just fix things up as needed. The thing is that if you actually, though, do all of the work that you should be doing, you become a much more skilled storyteller or artist or musician, and you're able to create what you truly wish to create. And I think that there will definitely come a point where you learn how to more appropriately use AI, where even people who wish to do most of the work by themselves can figure out how to use it as a tool that really lifts their efforts to a height that they haven't reached. But it's also going to be something that easily becomes a crutch that will do a lot of the creative process. For instance, Amazon has already been working towards stealing people's work by stealing their voices, stealing their books, in order to allow them to more quickly crank out their own stories and create their own audiobooks without paying the authors anything for their work. And studio executives have already said that they're looking towards using AI to eliminating hundreds of animating positions. And that's awful. And this is where I think independent animation and independent storytelling is really going to pick up some of these people and go places. For instance, Olin Rogers has been going around trying to hire as many people as possible who have been getting axed by animation studios because they're now going over to AI. AI will help out the process. AI, for instance, helped to make Klaus, which was a fantastic movie. The thing that I would argue, though, is this. The AI that was used in Klaus was used to help elevate some of the scenes by doing some of the shading and the coloring that would have eaten up a little bit more time. But all of the character animations, the character movements, the character voices, the writing of the story was largely, if not entirely, done by real humans applying their skills and doing their best. And where we rely too much on AI, we lose skill. AI makes up for that lack in skill, but if you rely on AI to get everything done that you want to do, are you a really skilled author? Are you really a skilled musician? Are you a skilled artist? That's my argument right there. And I know other people will disagree with me on that, and that's okay. Let them then explain that. The truth of the matter, though, is that, as I said, companies like Amazon are already looking to steal your work, and they don't care. ChatGTP has stolen so many people's work, they don't care. So many other companies are actively using AI to get rid of workers because they want to be able to cut costs because they've been making such bad stories that they've been losing money rather than putting in the effort. A good story. All right. Let's see here. For myself, and it's funny because at this point it's just a joke. Disney's bad. Let's all laugh at Disney. I know, Disney. How far you've fallen. Not even like 10 years ago, less than 10 years ago, you were the envy of the entertainment world, and now you're just a joke. Verity, I thought we were talking about gushing over magical girls. Oh boy. Oh boy. If Scott were here to talk about that, I think he would be like, no, 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 no. Let's see here. And they deserve it, but I really hope that they get better, meaning Disney. Walt Disney was an amazing story writer, and it sucks that his time is over. And it's true. And we're never going to be able to go back to that time. History does not repeat. You can't go back in the past. There are patterns to history. If we can learn from those patterns, we can learn how to act in the here and now and take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to us. From her slam. I watched No Evil from Betsy Lee, and I even bought a corn figure from her. Yeah. That's the thing, is that there is so much that is available in terms of good storytelling that other people are making that is not mainstream, that people like you and I, Ernest, like, we are willing to support that. I know I don't have a camera right here for you guys to see, but if I did have a camera, I would move it to my left and I would start showing you guys, hey, look, here's all of the books, and here's all of the fan art and all of the artwork and toys and whatnot that have come from independent creators or people who have done their own stuff. Like, I've got the really cool stained glass window thing from Drones that's like right there in front of me. I got the even though I know I ripped into. Yeah, uh, I will support the people who I think do good work, and I want to give others a chance to really show me what they've got. And a lot of people are willing to do that because people are starved for good storytelling. So, to start bringing it all together, thinking about the Peloponnesian War right here. Ultimately, in the Peloponnesian War, it ended with the Macedonians actually taking over. Granted, Macedonian conquest happened after the war, but the war facilitated Macedonian conquest. Now then, I have equated the Macedonians to indie creators. And I'll be honest and say this is a moment where, again, history doesn't repeat itself. We just have patterns. Indie creators will not completely take over mainstream entertainment. They do not have the unity, the funds, or the connections to make that happen. However, what we're going to see is we're going to continue to see, for instance, a studio like Glitch Productions continue to grow. It's possible, it's not guaranteed, but it's possible that Glitch Productions could become the next Rooster Teeth. And if they do not repeat the mistakes that Rooster Teeth made, if they keep away from Hollywood to the best of their ability, they could end up becoming a true rival studio that makes amazing stuff, and Hollywood can't touch them. Visipop, who is planting her feet both in indie animation and in Hollywood, she's winning. She absolutely is. And I will be doing a video next month about how Has Been Hotel has beaten Hollywood, and Hollywood is embarrassed. No one is talking about Has Been Hotel, despite the fact that Has Been Hotel has such a massive following, has beaten records according to Amazon, but more importantly, is selling so much merch. Visipop is totally fine to do whatever she wants. She can spend all of the hundreds of thousands of dollars it takes to make good episodes of Hell of a Boss because she is making so much money because so many people are supporting her. And wow, Hollywood just does not have that. I still love Red versus Blue. Yeah, no, here's the thing. Some of the stuff that Rooster Teeth made, like Red versus Blue, is going to remain beloved. And while I would argue that something, for instance, like Ruby has unfortunately fallen into the deep end, that will never take away how good seasons 1 through 3 were. And I feel like season 4 has really been given a raw deal, because going back and watching it, you can see Monty's fingerprints all over it. It's such a good season. Ruby was incredible in its heyday. And seeing something like Ruby Ice Queendom made over in Japan was beautiful. It brought so many of the old fans back to watching Ruby because it was so good, and it was a harkening back to Ruby's heyday. And that's what I actually see happening. Rather than one faction coming out on top and ruling the proverbial grease that is the entertainment complex, I think that we're going to see alliances between foreign filmmakers and foreign storytellers and big production studios in the States and in Europe working together to tell good stories. And with indie animation and indie storytellers and self-publishing becoming even more prominent, yes, it floods the market and it makes it harder to get recognized. But there is now but now there is an injection of better storytelling to be explored. And we now have so many options that we can support that we don't have to rely on on a creatively bankrupt Hollywood to entertain us. And we don't have to rely on these jerk publishers to provide us with entertainment. Though they do publish some really great books, and there are some fantastic establishment authors. There really, really are. But the game has changed. And that is where we as novice authors, we have to think about, okay, then, where do I really want to be? Because we have our factions right here. You can throw in your lot with AI and try to make a big name for yourself with AI. Just know this, a lot of people are very much anti-AI. And there's already a glut in the AI market. And a lot of it looks very derivative, very similar. It doesn't have the same pizzazz or feel as what people are making on their own. It's as ready to go. And it could be of death. There we go. Okay, it's back. That's annoying. Sorry, guys. Sorry for the audio quality if it just took a dip right there. Freaking internet connection. But yeah, so you can go the route of AI, or you can go the route that so many people right now are going, which is the divisive Athens versus Sparta route. Doesn't matter which ideology or which political party or what have you decide to attach yourself to. You're going to get involved in that. And there is money to be had. There's even fame to be had there. The only thing is this, is that you're going to have to engage with that kind of a community. There's a cost involved. And maybe you don't want to be divisive. Maybe you don't want to deal with all of that toxicity. And you will always be overshadowed by the people who came before you in that regard. So it's definitely a place you can go. And there's plenty of people who are going that route on the left or the right, which is stupid because a little sidebar right here. I hate talking about the political left or right because of this. Do you know where it actually comes from? It comes from the French Revolution, with the people on the left side of the room after the revolution was concluded being the people who were most anti-king, anti-church, and all about the people and what was at that time the budding ideas of socialism were seated on the left, and the people who were more in line with the king and wanted to be more traditional and support the church sat on the right side of the room. That is where we get the dumb idea of right and left, and it's silly. Why on earth do we align our ideas of political ideology according to where French revolutionaries who failed sat in a room? Again, this is why real world politics is silly. And if I were to ever do a podcast on real world politics, I would probably spend half of my time ranting and the other half of my time laughing my head off. But in any case, you can choose to be like the modern day equivalent of Sparta and Athens duking it out. And you can make a name for yourself there, and you can get an audience there, and you could stake your claim and make some money there. Or you can go the route of, being like a Macedonian doing the indie scene, which is basically where most of us here at Camille's Harem are at. True, I do want to get picked up by a traditional publisher because that's where the good money is at and where the resources are to really get your name out there. But for the time being, I'm not going to waste my time just sitting on my stories and sitting on my hands waiting for an agent to pick me up. I'm going to be proactive and do the whole indie scene. And again, there's so much competition there. There's not necessarily a whole lot of money to be had. So if you want to make a living off of it, it's very, very, very hard to do. But that is an option. And it's one that is very viable. And if you, especially you just want to get your name out there, you just want to have fun, you want to produce your stuff, maybe you're not actually thinking of making a living off of it, indie is the best way to go. If that's what you're thinking and feeling. So that option is open to you. And then there is the Persian element. All of us are foreigners to someone else. And you can reach out to other countries and see what you can possibly do. One of the things I really want to do is I want to excuse me, I want to be able to get into Japan, and I would love to pitch some of my story ideas to mangaka and work together with them. That is incredibly hard to do because the Japanese really do not like bringing in outsiders. The same goes for Korea, definitely with China. Be very wary if you go that route. But I've also had the chance to work with people from the Philippines. And so maybe if I can't get in necessarily into Japan, there is an open market in the Philippines. And there are plenty of amazing artists and storytellers and animators over in the Philippines who might be willing to work with me. And that's something I can keep open as an option, something I can do some more investigating into and see if that is a good route. For all of us here, if you're looking to make a name for yourself or make a living or make a productive hobby of being creative, whether as a writer, as a musician, as an artist, as just as a storyteller overall, a filmmaker, a showmaker, or say showrunner, there are tons of different options open to you. What you need to do is you need to be able to identify those different options and weigh the pros and cons. And a lot of that's going to come down to what research you do and your own personal standing and the story you want to tell. What kind of story do you want to tell? What audience do you want to connect with? And that'll let you know what side you're basically going to choose in this modern day entertaining Peloponnesian War. So there we go. I brought the whole thing full circle-ish. Why I talk about the Peloponnesian War? Because it's a great way of understanding the divides and the factions in modern day entertainment as they right now stand. You can really get lost in the weeds, and I've kind of done that a little bit tonight already. But if you understand the bigger picture, what's playing out, you can decide where you want to be, what you want to do, and then roll with it. So that is the history lesson from Master Lars, from Professor Lars, Dr. Lars. I'm not a professor or a doctor, so I'll have to renege those last two titles. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. If there's anything that I've said that makes sense, or if you thought I just spent the last, 45 minutes spewing a bunch of waffle. While you guys write down your comments in the chat, I'm actually going to quickly pull us back. Let's see here. There's actually a bit, since this is old reused footage. Yes, okay. Reused footage from another video. Talking about ancient history and just like learning a little bit. Once again, why I think it's really good to get that foreign detail and influence, hear stories that are outside of your culture that can really help you out. Allow me to present to you the Buddha and Hercules. Yes, this is very real. There is just to the northwest of India, in an area that used to be called Bactria, which I believe that is now partially modern day Pakistan, not all of Pakistan, but you will definitely find some stuff up in Pakistan from old Bactria, and going up a little bit further, you'll still find old Bactrian stuff. This is where the worlds of Persia, India, and Greece intermixed, in large part because Alexander the Great, as he came conquering on through, came all the way up to India and brought Greek culture with him. Now then, Greek culture, this far away from Greece, quickly intermingled with Persian. And so you have, with these stories, I kid you not, as Greek Persian storytellers began sharing their different stories, they learned from their Indian neighbors about the Buddha. And they were all like, whoa, Buddha sounds cool. And if anyone's like, hey, are you going to convert to Buddhism? Nah, but we're going to Buddha hang out with Hercules now. We have carvings depicting stories of Buddha and Hercules going around saving people from Persian monsters. So like weird, like twin-headed hyena dragon things going around eating up villages. Hercules would come and he would like kill the monster. Meanwhile, Buddha is like blessing everyone and feeding them and like making sure that Hercules doesn't destroy the land as he's killing these massive monsters. And then after that, like they're basically buddy cops. After they save the day, they pump their fists and are like, on to the next village to save. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Hercules and Buddha. Why is this not why is this not more prominent? Why is this not more popular? Can you imagine a buddy cop series of Hercules and Buddha hanging out in India, Pakistan, and just fighting crazy monsters and saving villages? I'd watch that show. I would 100% watch that show. And also a little bit of a fun thing as far as like cultural appropriation goes. So the Buddha from India, the old traditional Buddha, was meant to look as he was, skinny. He went from a very opulent life to a very austere life, giving up the pleasures of the world and becoming a philosopher, someone who was looking to do good and giving up the things that really held him back, his old opulent ways. So Buddha was depicted once upon a time as very skinny. However, the Buddha that we have found in the old Bactrian area, the Buddha that you see right on over here, he doesn't look skinny. In fact, actually, there's other carvings that make him look a little bit buff. Because again, he's hanging out with Hercules. So the Greeks and the Persians, when they came across Buddha, they made Buddha buff. So you've got buff Buddha and buff Hercules going around doing their thing. And then along the Silk Road from both Bactria and from India, the Chinese learn about Buddha. They really like the teachings of the Buddha. They think that's all really great and all. But a really skinny guy and a really big buff guy, those don't sound like enlightened people. An enlightened philosopher would be a little bit more rotund, a little bit older. And so the Chinese altered their perception of the Buddha to match what they culturally felt was more enlightened, more austere, interestingly enough. And so then that's how you get the larger Buddha over in China. And then when that comes on over to Japan, the Japanese take that into an all new direction, because not only now do they have big fat Buddha, but then also now you have monks who worship Buddha by murdering people. That's a real fact. When we went over to Japan last year as a writing group, we had the opportunity to actually go to some of the old like ninja villages and whatnot that resisted the control of the imperial Japanese court. And these were some of those people who were like, yeah, we worship Buddha by killing people. Oh boy, it took the shogun and the Japanese emperor spent, I think it was like 100 years trying to get these guys under control. History. Okay. Well, I haven't seen anything in the chat bringing up my ridiculous talk about history and the Peloponnesian War. So I will take that then as a cue to move on to the last thing that we'll talk about tonight before we then wrap up here. Something from ISO. This is new knowledge to me, which is good because my understanding of history is increasing. I need historical knowledge for some of my books. Yeah, and history's fun. Like, here's the thing. I know what it's like to dislike history. As a kid, I hated the topic of history. History was my worst subject until my sophomore year of high school, where I had a teacher who just made history a whole lot of fun. And we dove into the scandalous aspects of history, the funny aspects of history, the darker aspects of history, and it just made history come alive to me. And suddenly, I enjoyed it when I realized that history is really just a grandiose story that we can learn from, I was sold, and sold so hard that that's what I majored in. From Ernest Lamb, no different than all the people killed in the name of Christ and Muhammad. Yeah, and that's where that's like, I understand why there's so many people who are like religion is bad because of what it's led people to do. And the sad thing is this is that the founders of so many beautiful world religions never intended for people to use their teachings as a standard for killing people. And that's something that a lot of especially Americans don't understand about Islam, is that if you actually look at the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, every courtesy is meant to be given to the non-believers. Granted, they're supposed to pay the jizya tax, which is 3 times the tax that everyone else would pay if they don't convert to Islam. But otherwise, treat them fairly, treat them kindly, let them do their own thing. If they want to convert, excellent. The idea of the holy war is ultimately a misconception of the call to bring Islam to the rest of the world, which, yes, Muhammad and the early Muslims did by the sword, but then again, that was because everyone else was trying to kill them. So the early history of Islam is unfortunately very fraught with violence, but when you actually dive into the tenets of their beliefs, it's a very beautiful religion. And you don't have to believe in it to appreciate what it is trying to sell people. A lot of good things. The unfortunate thing is that religion is easily used as a tool to whip people up into a frenzy and get them to believe in things and do things that, according to really any polite society, you would never do. And that's just a shame, because religion should never be used that way. So let's then move on to my last little topic right here. Whoop, wrong bit right here. Yes. So coming here to Frieren Beyond Journey's End. If you haven't watched this anime right here, I'm going to give you guys another anime recommendation. I highly recommend this one. This one is so poignant. It's so beautiful. And I'm really looking forward to doing another review for it. I've done already one video looking at the first 4 episodes and just what it can teach us, what it is trying to say about characters who are crossing between the past, the present, and the future. And how the main character, Frieren, who's just such a fantastic character, I freaking love her, how you have this journey that she's going on to in many ways reconnect with her past, because she's now beginning to realize only after her friends begin dying that she never got to know them as well as she wanted to, as well as she should have. And she can feel that loss, but time is moving on. And so while she's trying to connect with her past again in a greater way, she can't lose sight of the present. She must live in the now and enjoy the relationships that she has in that moment with all these other humans who, compared to her, are incredibly short-lived. But just because they're incredibly short-lived doesn't mean that those relationships are worthless. In fact, they mean everything. And that's what she has to learn. And she is striving for a future. She is striving for a future in which her apprentice, Fan, is able to be the woman, be the mage that she is meant to be. She's trying to help Stark, or Stock, if I'm going to say his name more German-like, to be the warrior that he needs to be in the future, so that way he can return to his teacher Eisen and have that connection that he's always wanted with the dwarf. There are these goals for the future which help to guide them in the now, but they live in the now while appreciating the past. And that kind of a message, the way I just communicated it, is clunky. But the way that the anime portrays that message is just beautiful. It is so well done. and it's one that I've been happy to keep on watching, and it's one that I'm looking forward to catching up entirely with. And as I said, I'll be doing at least one other video, probably a couple more other videos on it, because there's so much to learn from it. And one of the big things is the use of names, and how you can actually use a little bit of a trope, which is actually not just Japanese, but also has connections, for instance, to the Greeks, to ancient Greece, about what names can tell you about characters and their character arcs. And before I get into that, let me quickly get there. I hear this chat from Ernest. I think the major shortcoming of history taught in schools is the lack of a holistic approach. We don't know what's going on with contemporary civilizations. I guess it's hard to teach that way. Myso, yeah, probably. I found the way they spoke about it being incredibly boring, the droning voice, the matter-of-fact tone, and the constant switching from one topic to the other. And honestly, a lot of that comes down to just, unfortunately, bad teachers. And it's something that when I was still teaching, that was something that we were always focused on within my department. And maybe I was just worked with really great teachers. Maybe I was the exception, or I had the exceptional workplace. Because the teachers I worked with were all about trying to make lessons that connected with our students. We wanted our students to learn specific skills from being in history, that they should learn how to research, they should learn how to form their own thoughts based on the opinions and the facts and evidence given to us from history, to understand bias when we see it, but not to rule out bias. Because when we discard someone's opinion or their words because of bias, we actually lose important information. So it's not just simply to identify bias, but not to be prejudiced towards that bias. So that, and learning communications, improving their writing skills, there were lots of skills that we wanted our students to improve and to develop by studying history. And of course, we wanted them to actually understand the past. Now, one of the problems with teaching history is that there's so much. What do you teach? And that's why the curriculum is broken up across all of school, or who, right, giving away teaching skills. All right, we're back. Of course, we wanted our students to understand stuff. For instance, I taught mostly U.S. history at the time, and so I had to get my students interested in why the founding fathers of America did what they did, and why that actually matters to us today, and how that, for instance, would set up things such as the Louisiana Purchase, the Civil War, and how that actually spun off into so many of, like, for instance, the racial problems America still deals with today, why those issues were never properly confronted after the Civil War, and just trying to always show my students, look, the world that you guys live in today here in the US is because of these things that happened in the past. All of these things that you guys love to complain about, there's a reason why that exists. And if you understand the reason why it exists, then maybe in the present you can make a good choice, an informed choice, for how, at the very least, you can improve yourself, and maybe we might even be able to improve the nation. Who cares what your ideology is right here? I don't care one way or the other. And my students never figured out where I fell on the political spectrum. At the end of each year, they all agreed I'm an anarchist, which is not correct. I am not an anarchist. But that's what they always went with, because it was the most sensational thing, and because I taught them about anarchy. Oh, you better believe. I taught them everything. I taught them everything from anarchy to fascism, which is a concept that most people really do not get, unfortunately. So I definitely tried to focus on those things and come up with not just good lectures, but also good activities. Like, for instance, talking about the whole politics thing, bringing in toys and having kids, like teenagers, are like, oh, this feels so awkward. But by the end of the class, they're like, oh, politics is basically playing with toys. You just got to figure out who wants what and how you're going to make everything work out. Okay, it makes sense now. And that so that was my approach. I think most of my students walked away from the American Revolution knowing that George Washington had sexy thighs. Yes. Fun fact: George Washington was very well noted for his sexy thighs. In every painting of George Washington, he's given thunder thighs to emphasize just how sexy his legs were. I am not making this up. Right, so Red Dead Redemption got me interested in the history of the general area, and I've used Red Dead Redemption actually in lessons before. It was really fun. And Elden Ring and Dark Souls got me interested in European history. Skyrim got me interested in Norwegian history. And that's fantastic. Yeah, you found your pattern. Video games help open you up to interest. And that's absolutely fine. That was something I tried to do a lot, again, with my students. Find out what they were interested in, and pull out facts, examples, opportunities from various mediums to get kids interested in different aspects of history and hopefully to connect with those lessons better. And I mean, that just goes from student to student. Teachers try their best, and if students try their best, it all clicks. If one or the other isn't trying, it doesn't work out. I said, why weren't you my teacher? Well, I'm being a teacher right now. I will admit, I'll admit right here, I do miss being in the classroom. And I'll tell you guys why I'm no longer a full-time teacher. The reason is because I was getting so worn down by so many of the problems that plague public teaching. And too many people blame the teachers. And while there are definitely teachers that deserve blame, and there's teachers who make some bad mistakes, COVID, for instance, actually exposed a lot of problems that many teachers should have sought to rectify, issues that actually most of the public doesn't even know about. But a lot of teachers didn't want to focus on it because it's just such a problem. There's so many holes in public education, unfortunately. And people try to plug up those holes with political ideology. Here in the States, both Democrats and Republicans kept trying to hijack our curriculum. Parents always got mad at us no matter what we tried to do. Teachers who weren't doing their job in elementary and middle school would hand off to us high schoolers who didn't even know anything about the American Revolution. At this point in time, they should have already learned most of what they needed to know, and my class should have just been review about the revolution, so that way we could have talked statecraft, which would have allowed them to understand more about why America is the way that it is. And I could have gotten into all of the crazy stories about like how back in the day, in the early American history, Americans were famous for having fire departments. The only problem was that these fire departments acted more like gangs, and they would go and commit arson in order to pull out other fighter gangs, so that way they could beat them up before putting out the fire. Crazy stuff like that is stuff that I would have loved to have told my students, but I didn't have the time because I had to go back and from square one explain who the heck George Washington was. And so when political parties are getting involved, when other teachers aren't doing their jobs, when students are more concerned with their cell phones and just all these other things, it wore down on me so much. And I tried my best to care about my students. I really did. And I quit actually because I began to realize that I wasn't caring about my students anymore. I was just so worn down that I didn't want to put in the effort like I once had, where I had been so excited to do all of these different kinds of activities, like replicating the stock market exchange and going really wild in class, where we would do like 2 days of the stock market exchange. It was always a blast. Or showing people how Ronald Reagan's trickle-down theory sounds really good in practice. It sounds really good in theory, and then we would then do a special practice involving water and people having a chance to get wet, which is normally when summer was already beginning here in Arizona. So having the chance to play around with water always got the kids feeling good and cool. But to show them like, hey, look, this is the philosophy behind it. It sounds really great, but when we put into practice, yeah, you're getting your water, but you're actually not getting as much water as you need. And so having those different kinds of exercises and practices, I loved doing that. But by the time of my last year of teaching, I was just getting burned out. I didn't want to deal with so many of the issues anymore, and I was no longer getting excited to teach my lessons and to introduce my students to all this new stuff. And I realized I could keep on going. By that time, I'd hit my stride. I had all of my lessons pre-prepared. I came to class every day and did exactly what I was supposed to do. I was coasting, and I was making money. Sure, I wasn't getting rich, but I was making money, and everything was going very well. But I wasn't caring about the students anymore. And because I was the case, I was like, I can't be a good teacher. I can't be a good teacher if I don't care about my students. So I chose to quit. And it was a very hard decision to make. And it's one where I still am like, I would love to go back, but uh, how quickly would I get ground down again? And so I threw myself into writing, into doing stuff here on YouTube ever since I quit. And that's the story. I'm Omega. I remember there was a movie about that. Yeah. There's some great movies about teachers who kind of go through this kind of stuff, and it's sad that people who love these movies haven't yet learned that that's kind of the lesson, that we have to treat our teachers right. We have to encourage our teachers. When teachers do something wrong, that should be called out. No teacher should be allowed to get away with something that they're not supposed to do. I am definitely for that. But we definitely need to show more love to our teachers, and we need to show more understanding for our students and help them to overcome a lot of the things that are really holding them back. And we need to get the politics out of it. Let's see here. Ernest Lamb, Arizona has 3 Jaguars, only place in USA with Jaguars. Yeah, we got Jaguars. Not only in our zoos, but out in the wild. Thanks to all different kinds of big cats migrating up from Mexico and coming into the area. You always got to be a little bit careful in some of the places that you go around here. Where I live, it's very easy for me to go pop out into the middle of the desert and just get completely lost out there if I want to. And there are some big animals out there. There's some big stuff you don't want to mess with. All right. So coming on back to what I was actually going to talk about with Frieren Beyond Journey's End, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a preview for an upcoming video. And it is how the mangaka and the anime, since the anime is the adaptation of the manga, but the mangaka did a fantastic job with using German words to help signify who these characters are and their character journeys. In Japan, fictional characters and even people in real life, their names are made from merging different words and concepts together to create a new kind of meaning. And the hope is that especially from creators, is that by having a name written a certain way in Japanese, that they're already communicating to the audience the personality and the potential character arc that this character is going to go on. In Frieren Beyond Journey's End, all of the characters have German words for names. They don't have German names. They don't have stuff like Johann, Anya, Lars, Brigitte as names. Instead, they have nouns or verbs for names. So, like for instance, the main character Frieren. Frieren means to freeze, and it works well for who she is because of how she seems so cold, so aloof, and yet this seemingly cold personality wants to connect with other people. She's going to warm up to others and find the joy, the light, the warmth, and the love of having all these other relationships with the other characters within the series. That is her journey. Frieren is meant to go from freezing and aloof to caring and connected. And for her apprentice right here, you see, everyone always refers to as Fern. I also refer to as Fern. It was a revelation to me earlier this week as I was thinking about this anime after watching a few episodes. It's only connected. Oh my gosh. Her name's not Fern. Her name is Fan. And sure, that might sound a little bit weird to you, like, okay, Fern, Fan, what's going on right here? Fan in German means away or distance. And Fan is a character who, when you see her throughout the entire anime, it's like she has this thousand-yard stare. Like she's always got some kind of PTSD going on. And she also, like Frieren, finds it hard to connect with other people. She's distant from others. And so her character arc is to connect with others, to close that distance. And especially when you see what her relationship is with Stark, it is how she has to learn, okay, what is he thinking? What does he want? How do we communicate? How do we close this great metaphysical distance between us? We're very close to each other. We even got some romantic tension going on right here. How do we close that distance and truly connect? That is what Fan has to go through. And then for a character like Stark, who, yeah, Stark, it's interesting because you got Stark, and we're all used to saying Tony Stark. Oh, Stark means strong. In Hochdeutsch, in proper High German, his name would be pronounced Stock, which I don't know how well you guys can hear it over the microphone, the difference between Stark and Stock. It's a difference in how you use the A and the R. Now then, because I am a heathen and I learned my German in Bavaria, his name would not be said Stock. It would be called, his name would be Stock. Yeah, the ST becomes a sh sound in the Bavarian accent. So I'll just go with Stock because for me that just rolls off the tongue easier than saying Stark even. So Stock, his journey is that, yes, he is an incredibly strong character. I love his introduction. The fight scene between Stock and the dragon is incredible. It is so beautifully animated. And it's so well set up, so well executed, brilliant payoff. I could do an entire battle analysis video off of that one episode alone because it's so dang good. But for Stock, despite the fact that he is physically strong, he has a very weak sense of self-worth. He has a very weak sense of bravery. And it requires people like Frieren and Fan to get behind him and to really support him so that way he can actually become a truly strong character and live up to his name, Stock. For myself, I hear that Frieren's relationship is extremely well written. It absolutely is. Holy dang, it is so well written. I love how the relationships within Frieren Beyond Journey's End are portrayed. It's so good. From I'm Omega, like Bloodstock from Common Rider Build. The dude's an a-hole to the highest degree. Yes. But for another character, and I'm going to get into more detail for this character and his name, and I don't, and maybe I'm giving the mangaka too much credit here, especially because so many other uses of German words throughout the series are kind of silly. It's like, why? You could have easily chosen another word. Why is one of the regions called Rad? Rad in German means wheel. There's nothing about this region that connotates a wheel. You chose the name because it looks cool. And because Rad sounds radical. But one character whose name was very intriguing for me to see is Zyme. Now that in the show, and I'm pretty certain that in the English dub, I haven't yet listened to the English dub for his introduction. I'm pretty certain that they would just simply say sign or scene, even. Oh, if they say scene, that'd be awful. The word is sein, Sein, pronounced sein in German. Sein is a verb. It can also be used as a possessive pronoun, but for the most part, you will experience sein as a verb. It is potentially the most important verb in all of the German language. It is also the most annoying verb in the German language because it will never look like sein, ever. Non-conjugated, it's sein. But the moment that sein is put into a sentence as a verb, it ceases to be sein. It becomes bin, ist, sind, seid, war, wäre, waren, warst. The sein looks so different the moment it's put into practice. And I was wondering, okay, why name this character sein? Well, one of the things is that the verb sein, incredibly useful. As I said, probably the most important verb in the German language. But sein by itself, it's such a nebulous meaning. It means to be. However, the moment that you use sein, it becomes anything else but that. And so sein is just this weird word that is not really doing anything. It just hangs off by itself and just it's something else. It's something else until it's used. And the character sein, who you meet far later on into the series, is a character who is just hanging out in his village doing nothing. He has so much potential. He has so much power. He is probably the most versatile of all the characters in Friren's adventuring party. But he doesn't do anything until someone else impresses upon him what to do. And then, with the help of other people, in whatever situation he gets into, once he starts adventuring, sein conforms to that situation and perfectly executes whatever it is he has to do. Just like the verb sein, he is able to change, adapt, and be exactly what everyone needs in that moment. He's one of the coolest characters. It's going to be interesting if you do watch it to see what happens to him. Because I am interested, since I'm not caught up yet with the entire story, I'm interested to see what's going to be done with him. Because it was a very interesting direction that the story went with him. It lived up again to the meaning of the word, to be, and what he chooses to be, and how he changes, just like how the verb sein changes. Now, again, maybe I'm giving the mangaka way too much credit, and this is just because I happen to know the German language. But that was very, very interesting to me. So then, as the last little bit of writing advice before we start wrapping things up tonight, when you want to, I think, really get in deep with character, like, agree with that. It's very hard to sometimes settle down with a name. In fact, okay, Wheel of Death is gone. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I've had a story in my head for years, and I even knew what the characters were supposed to do, and I've been plotting it and coming up with world building elements. I never had a name for any of these characters until Scott helped me out, and we went into the Japanese way of crafting names and taking elements of these characters and bringing them and their character arcs together to create names. And it's amazing how well it suddenly clicked. For my Gear Witch, who I've just been referring to as Gear Witch this entire time, I finally have a name for her. Moko. And as silly as it sounds, it fits her because she is a rapscallion adventurer through and through. And Moko, that name in Japanese, captures that. And Scott explained a little bit better to me her whole name, what it means, and I'm excited to get more into that in the future. And I'll definitely be sharing more about Gear Witch as I start beginning to write that story, because this is going to be fun. I will admit, Gear Witch is a slight ripoff of the first Mistborn book, but I was thinking, let's take basically magic punk to a new level right here. Not necessarily to what kinds of crazy machines can we make, but rather instead, what kind of crazy awesome society can we build that you have not seen before, with characters and powers that are fairly unique and deliver just a fun shonen style protagonist who is going to hopefully capture your hearts. Moko feels like monkey. Ernest, yes, that is probably a good description for this grease monkey, because that's what she is. She is a magical grease monkey. Ernest also wants to know, do we know if the writer knows German? I am going to say that the mangaka for Frieren does know German. There's at least from everything that I have seen, from how the different German words have been used and how they correlate with the characters, it bespeaks a real understanding of the German language. I don't know if they can actually speak German, but they at least understand enough about German and the various words that they can use those words well to describe the characters. Myso, I have a lot to thank German mythology for, especially in my mythology story. Excellent. German mythology is fun. German fairy tales are fun. German superstitions are crazy. And it also kind of depends on what region of Germany you're in. You'll get something very different. But so if you ever find yourself in a difficult situation where you're like, I don't know what to name my character, think about your character's personality. And I'll give another example from one of my other stories, from The Legend of the Ten Lords. One of my favorite characters to write, and he's also one of the hardest characters to write for, is Bob the Virus. Bob is fantastic. And one of the things that makes Bob so much fun to write is that he is insane. And like when you think about it, you're like, if you just have the name Bob, Bob sounds silly. Bob sounds ridiculous. Bob, yes, is a sort of Robert. But if you call someone Robert, that sounds serious. The moment that you start referring to someone as Bob, they sound fun. They sound silly. They sound like they don't take themselves too seriously. So as a result, this insane OP individual where everyone else is like wielding these amazing names and they've got these crazy stories and whatnot, you got Bob. And Bob is hilarious. Bob is horrifying. Bob is a force of nature. And it's hilarious how his name is so simple, silly name, clashes horribly with everything that he is and does. And that's kind of the humor, the dark humor of experiencing Bob when you read The Legend of the Ten Lords. I have a group of Fey hunters in my story called Jäger. Yep, the Jäger. Oh, Jäger Schnitzel. Oh, Jäger Schnitzel, so delicious. The Jäger is just such a fun word. The word for hunter. And Jägermeister, which is still a profession. There are still Jägermeister around Germany. They are basically the American equivalent of forest rangers, of game and fish employees. And they are also some of the few people in Germany who are allowed to own and use guns. Fun little fact right there. From Ryan, I'm writing a main character who's very stoic and heroic. He's willing to sacrifice a love to save the innocent. I named him Alejandro because I like the sound of it. I only found out later how well that name fits. That's fantastic. And yeah, sometimes a name just fits super well for a character. Play around with names a little bit, and eventually you might just find a name that fits really, really well. From Ernest, the Church of Bob is a religion that definitely does not take itself seriously. Are they next door to the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster? Which, fun Fun little fun random fact from the life of Lars. One of my good friends became a priest of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, so that way he could, by law in Colorado, officiate at our mutual friend's wedding. So one of my good friends, became a priest of the Flying Spaghetti Monster in order to officiate at another friend's wedding, and that friend, get this, married his high school stalker. Yeah, the girl who stalked him throughout high school, he ended up marrying her. And they got, I think, 3 kids now, still happily together. So, I mean, who am I to judge? Still, don't stalk the people that you have feelings for. That's creepy. I will not condone that. Another thing that I would suggest, and granted, this is more humorous, but this is actually something that you should try, especially if you have names for characters that are definitely fantasy or sci-fi oriented. Use those names out loud and do what one guy once told me. He's like, before you name your kids anything, shout your children's names in sentences. Stuff like, stop chasing your sister or brother, stop punching them, and use their names and if the name sounds silly while you're shouting it, you might not want to name your kid that. But it will help you out, especially if you're using fantasy names, to help you be like, okay, then how am I supposed to say this character's name out loud? And it sometimes is a little bit tripping up, and you figure out how to refine it. So, like, for instance, when I wrote my book Tumblteller, Mikulirian is the name of my main character, the dragon who goes out on her adventure and to perform her magical play for other dragons. It took a little bit of time. I had to say the name out loud a couple of times to realize this is how it should probably be spelt, and this is how it should sound, so that way it's not too weird. Mikulirian. For another dragon, Silandria. How is that supposed to be spelt? How should that look? If I say Silandria, how close do I get to saying cilantro? And figure out how to not trip up over my own characters' names. Saying your characters' names out loud and practicing with them, putting them into sentences out loud, can really help you realize when a name fits just right. Like, for instance, Ryan calling one of his characters Alejandro. It's a fantastic, strong name, and when you say it out loud, it just fits. Alejandro sounds like a great dude. Just the name already sounds so strong, so it works. If I say Bob again, Bob just sounds silly, which is how it's intended. If I am saying Roberts, again, I'm like, oh, okay, so that's how it sounds. What kind of feeling should that then convey to the reader, to the audience? So saying names out loud can really help. And I know this sounds silly and simple, but for a lot of people, they don't say their characters' names out loud because they're usually feeling super embarrassed and they don't want anyone to overhear how ridiculous their characters sound. From ISO, and then my protagonist's name is Hunter, and he earns a title, Venatorius. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Venatorius. His Fey Hunter name means hunter in Latin, I think. Okay, interesting right there. My mother's writing a dragon book. Sometimes I hear her muttering words to sound them out. It's amusing. It is. It absolutely is. And I mean, it can get a little bit silly and embarrassing, but it really does help to say out loud the characters, their names, their titles, just like right now. I'm like, am I getting Venatorius correct? Is this something that other people would be able to hear and whatnot? Hear and put it together properly within their own heads. A great example of where this can go wrong is, for instance, in the Stormlight Archive. One of the characters, when you read his name looks like it should be pronounced Adolin. And I actually like the sound of Adolin. Turns out that his name should be pronounced Adolin, and Adolin just doesn't sound cool because Adolin, as he actually is such a cool guy. He's this amazing duelist, very honorable, very outgoing, very strong-willed. He's the good boy of the entire series. Like, everyone wants Adolin to end up happy because this boy deserves it. Dang it, he's such a good guy. Adolin just sounds silly. It sounds too immature. for the kind of guy that he becomes. Adeline sounds way stronger, and like when you know that his father's name is Dalinar, Adeline sounds even better than Adolin. But Brandon Sanderson is going to Brandon Sanderson, and he wants his character's name to be Adolin. So, boom, but without any sort of guide to understand that that's how his name is supposed to be pronounced. For years, everyone was saying Adeline until he finally said, okay, guys, it's Adolin. And other people were like, Adolin? That just sounds dumb. And then the huge Brandon Sanderson fans were like, anyone who says anything other than Adolin is a heretic. Oh, boy. That's another conversation to be had. Toxic fan, the unfortunate rise of toxic fans in the Brandon Sanderson fan base. Quickly catching up right here from Ernest. Alejandro is the Spanish version of Alexander, I think. Possibly so. I actually will not say anyway, because I don't myself know. I'm Omega. I'm planning on making a series, either a motion comic or graphic novel, and I'm on the rocks on the last name for the protagonist. Say for that, I'm Omega. What I would suggest is thinking about what kinds of names, like throwing around some names, thinking what sounds good for my particular character, and coming back to the idea of thinking about how names hold meaning for characters that signify something. So, when I think about my last name just literally means the son of Jens, which, if you know the original Jens, would mean something. Otherwise, it's now just my last name. Whereas for other people, their names could actually have some interesting connotation. For instance, I knew a guy with the last name of Hickenlooper. Hickenlooper is a bastardization of of what his name probably should have been, which is Heckenliebe, and that would then mean hedge lover. So either he got his name because an ancestor of his was making love in the hedges, or he really loved hedges. Either way, that's how you get the name. Or Smith. Where did that come from? You find someone somewhere down the line as one of your ancestors was a smith of some kind. And it could be cool. It could be a goldsmith, could be a blacksmith, could be a silversmith. Anything right there. So for you, I'm Omega. What I would do is, if you're having a hard time figuring out what your last name for your protagonist should be, think about who your protagonist is and what kind of a last name, an appropriate last name, might convey something about their family, about their character, or about their journey. And that might actually then put you onto a good path for either coming up with a new name entirely, or finding an appropriate name that does exist in real life that you could just pop on. That would be my suggestion. From ISO, Venatorius is supposed to sound dramatic, like Zeus or Atorius. And yes, you pronounced it correctly. Hey, awesome. Whew. My brief spat with Latin in high school still holds true. Though funny enough, I actually did better with Greek in school than I did with Latin. I had an English teacher for 2 years back to back in high school, who was adamant that we learn the Greek and Latin roots of our vocabulary list. So we also had to learn Greek and Latin in that class. I've forgotten most of it, but I do remember that and how hard Latin was for me. So with all that being said, guys, wow, we have gone on now for over 2 hours, and I'm beginning to feel it in my voice. So we'll start wrapping up things right here real quick from Ryan. Yes, I also heard that Alejandro is the Spanish version of Alexander, referring to Saint Alexander. As such, Alejandro can be translated to defender of humanity, which is why it's so perfect. That's awesome, Ryan. I'm glad that you figured that out right there. And that does fit, especially for a very heroic character and someone who's willing to stand up, fight to sacrifice. That's great. That's a name that really does fit. And for any of the rest of you who might be having trouble at any kind of point with coming up with names for your characters, just know this: you're not alone. Everyone struggles with it, and being able to talk it out with us here and learning some tips can hopefully put you on the right track. Ultimately, it's up to you to find the name that fits best with your characters. Yes, I definitely got help from Scott putting everything together, but it was still up to me to communicate to him who my characters are, what are their traits, what's their character arc supposed to be. And then with his knowledge of Japanese, he was able to then pull things together. And then I still had to give the final say on these characters. And I still had to understand to make sure that the names truly did match up with who these characters are supposed to be. And I love that. And so sometimes getting help from other people really can put you on the right path. But ultimately, you as the creator, you as a storyteller, it's up to you to properly name your characters. And it can be hard. If you're like me and you end up taking like 2 years to name your characters, just know it's fine. Yes, it's embarrassing. Yes, it's frustrating, but it's not the end of the world. From Ernest, my name is Ernest Eugene Lamb, means seriously good genetic strike. Very nicely put, Ernest. So, man, I will just say this. Say this before we close. Lars is an interesting name to go by because if you know the not just what it literally translates to, but if you know the meaning behind those words, either my name is really great or really sad, because Lars means laurel. Now then, okay, laurel. Well, the laurel bush means two things. It means victor. It also means doomed love. And the reason why it means doomed love is because you have Apollo who fell in love with a nymph, chased her down. She refused to give on in. And when he caught up with her, she changed herself permanently into a laurel bush so that way he could never have his way with her, because she was that adamant that they would never get together. And so that is why the laurel wreath was given to Olympians and then later to conquerors in Rome, because it was a signifier that they had achieved the impossible. They were victors. But that symbology, that meaning, only comes because of a rather sad story for why the laurel bush exists, because a nymph refused to love or be loved by the Greek god Apollo. So that right there, that is the background to the meaning of Lars. All right then. So that being said, y'all, thank you so much for being around for this live stream. I did not expect it would go on this long, and I'm going to go and seriously rest my voice now. Thank you all for being a part of this, for listening to my historical diatribe, trying to piece things together. I know I didn't exactly give any sort of grandiose solution to the current day problems of the entertainment industry, but that's because there is no one singular solution. It is a problem. For all of us, we need to just treat each other respectfully. We need to do what is right by ourselves, by other people, and we need to figure out which faction we want to be a part of, who we want to make stories for, why we want to do that, weigh the costs and the weigh the pros and the cons, and then make our best choice, and then do it. And just simply go out and do what you got to do. Be storytellers, be artists, be inspirations to other people. And I'll just end this here by saying that at the end of the day, regardless of what happens to Hollywood, if it goes crashing down and burning, so be it. But you need your stories, because your stories complete you. They allow you to explore the world in a new way. They elevate your sense of self, your understanding of the world. They are just a great adventure to go on, which is why you need your stories. And your stories need you, because they are, in many ways, a living thing, waiting for you to give them your time and attention and help them to become what they need to be. And when you can do that, your stories can be just these amazing things. But then also this, because the world is hungry for good stories. And if you're willing to give your stories the time and attention and love that they need, they can become the great stories that the world has been looking for. Which is why I like to tell people, you need your stories need you, and the world needs your stories. Wherever you fall in this soon entertainment. And with all that being said, y'all, thank you again so much. And that is my last goodbye. So, tschüss.